Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm joined by Joyce. Joyce, it's daytime. The last time we did
I know,
this,
I can see you.
it was nighttime. I was in a undisclosed location. Now I'm back in my den here or whatever.
You survived Blair Witch.
I did. I stayed away from the corner of the room, and now I'm back. So that's good. No stick. It was like stick figures, right? In the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it. So.
I haven't seen it a long time either, but it was a lot of fun when I saw it. No, Joyce, we're not here to talk about Blair Witch Project, but I do think this is more grist for the mill of us doing a 99 episode of this, because I feel like I saw Blair Witch in the theater. It was great, but no, we're not going to talk about Blair Witch. We're teaching Miss Tingle again, or the SAG Awards. And I guess we'll mention the SAG Awards.
We should try to fold in teaching Mrs. Tingle every episode, though.
We just did here.
I know.
No, we're here to talk about the Oscars. Joyce, it's Wednesday. We're recording this. It's a big day. Coming up, we'll talk about the Oscars fan favorite moment and also the show changes, which were just delightful this week. The Academy president was out doing press to kind of, stamp out some fires from the membership and
defend themselves.
Public. Yeah. We're going to start, Joyce, with the Best Picture race. After Coda won on Sunday night at the SAG Awards, we talked about perhaps is that the movie that people will rally around as an alternative to The Power of the Dog. And then early this week, I guess was maybe on the Monday episode of Mark Maron's podcast, WTF, Sam Elliott just unloaded on our frontrunner, Power of the Dog. Joyce, I have the quotes here.
Please read it.
You want to talk about that piece of shit, he said. You didn't like that one, Mark Maron asked. And then he says, F no. Why? I'll tell you why I didn't like it anyway, Sam Elliott said. I looked at it when I was down there in Texas doing the Yellowstone spinoff, 1883. What really brought it home to me the other day when I said, do you want to fucking talk about it? There was a fucking full page ad out in the LA Times, and there was a review, not a review, but a clip, and it talked about the evisceration of the American myth. And I thought, what the fuck? This is the guy that's done Westerns forever, the evisceration of the American West. They made it look like, what are all those dancers that those guys in New York who wear bow ties and not much else? Remember them from back in the day? I guess that's the Chippendales, Joyce, I believe he's talking about. And he went on from there, very unhappy with the movie, Joyce, I would say.
And also Jane Campion.
What the F does this woman, she's a brilliant director, by the way. I love her work, previous work, but what does she know from down there, New Zealand, about the American West? And why did she shoot this movie in New Zealand and call it Montana and say, this is the way it was? Rub me the wrong way. So Sam Elliott not into it, Joyce. Not into The Power of the Dog.
Yeah, you know what was funny is I saw that circulating Monday, and I was like, I'm waiting for an outlet to pick this up. Yes. And then it happened yesterday.
Everyone picked it up yesterday. Yeah. So I saw people were, obviously those are pretty loaded comments, not just about the movie, but about what it's about. I think
there's a lot going on there. There's homophobia, xenophobia, misogyny.
Yeah. Sam Elliott. Yeah. So I saw Mark Maron actually tried to defend the movie a little bit in the interview. I think he was like, well, that's kind of the point of the movie, is like all this stuff that Sam Elliott was perhaps complaining about. I also saw an older interview Sam Elliott did where he was like praising Brokeback Mountain. So it's not he was in that interview, he was nuanced to call the Brokeback Mountain was not a gay cowboy movie to him because they were not cowboys, they're sheep herders.
Yeah, and also he's worked with Ang Lee before.
Yes,
so
he was in Hulk, I believe.
Yes.
So he was like, I respect him greatly as a filmmaker. So anyway,
he just seems to have a very speaking of the American myth, like he has this mythologized view of a Western and a cowboy, the machismo aspect. And if anyone infringes upon that and have as he says, like quotes of homosexuality, he's taking umbrage with that.
Right.
And also I feel like he does not know that this is based on a book by Thomas Savage.
No, I don't think he knew much about it. I mean, clearly he did not like it, regardless. And I would say Sam Elliott at 77 years old, I'm not necessarily totally surprised that he was not, enraptured by this film, I guess. But Joyce, we were talking about this before we started recording. There's a sense perhaps that this is like, is this a shot across the bow of Power of the Dog as a Best Picture contender? Because Sam Elliott's so unhappy, and perhaps I guess the to play devil's advocate, is Sam Elliott the first takedown of Power of the Dog that will allow people, if they parse through, like we said, the homophobia and xenophobia of the statement, do they kind of go, yeah, I was not that into it. Does Sam Elliott's aggressively anti-Power of the Dog take give people who are lukewarm on it permission perhaps to start saying it's not for me?
I mean, he's definitely not the only person in the Academy or the industry that feels that way. Probably they're just not vocal about it like he is, it's like the silent majority, basically. Maybe not even my majority, maybe a minority. I would, when like this came out, everyone obviously made the direct comp to Brokeback Mountain and Ernest Borgnine's and Tony Curtis's comments back then. Obviously that lost to Crash. I would hope we've made some progress in 16 years, but as you said, he's 77 years old. And there's definitely other people who probably share similar sentiments. But I would think, this would also just rally Power of the Dog supporters around it. Like maybe if you enjoyed the film, maybe it's like in your top 3, but now you're just completely offended by his remarks. You're like, I'm gonna vote at number 1, or rank it higher than I would have.
I could see that for sure. I think the response was largely positive towards Power of the Dog, right? Like I didn't.
Well, it was also like, this is like the whole film is about toxic masculinity, and it's like you're just kind of proving its point. Correct.
So I saw a lot of people jumping into the defense of Power of the Dog. I think the Netflix film Twitter feed did a great.
Oh yeah, incredible shade.
Yeah, it was like he's just a man, right? It was that part.
Yeah, that scene.
That part of the scene with the Kirsten Dunst video or screenshot, excuse me. Yeah, so I thought that was I don't know. I guess I would say like I think you're right. I think it's going to make people more into Power of the Dog perhaps than not. I would say like I do think there is a slight push against Power of the Dog from people in the Sam Elliott ilk / like just maybe the regular moviegoers. While Power of the Dog, which we'll talk about, was on the fan favorite list.
The top 10 finalists.
It was a top 10 finalist for hashtag fan favorite of the year. I do think that the more, like we have talked about, the more regular moviegoers who see Power of the Dog when they're just scrolling through Netflix are perhaps going to be like, I think.
Right.
But I would say the fact is, and we've talked about this with how the Oscar nominations played out and just in general, the Academy is growing more diverse and more international, more importantly. And I think we've seen over and over, and especially with the response to Power of the Dog in the nominations, it feels almost like the Academy is shifting much more towards like a cineast perspective than like a typical, 2012 Oscar voter when Argo is like, like it used to be like the most I'm going to say mediocre, but I don't mean mediocre because I
like middlebrow.
Middlebrow. There you go. Yeah. The most middlebrow movie was likely the movie that would win Best Picture, and especially in a consensus, in a preferential ballot, that was going to surface. But now, as we've seen recently with like Nomadland and Parasite, and even like Spotlight, I think you could argue like these are movies, Green Book accepted, that are not the most middlebrow options, right? And I wonder if Green Book is that the last stand of the middlebrow, as we like kind of have moved into this bigger, broader international body that is much more focused on like the art of cinema than like what's a crowd pleaser. Because I think if, like we said, like looking at last year, like Chicago 7 probably would have won Best Picture over Nomadland if it was 2013. But in 2021, it was not even close. Like we all knew Nomadland was going to
win. Yeah, I think, Green Book winning really did a number on all of us. And it was only 3 years ago, but still, it was just like, I think a lot of people, for other reasons, also like did not believe in Parasite winning, even though there were a lot of signs there for it. But I also believe that was just like lightning in a bottle. Like we might not see something like that again, or at least for a very long time. And then, like you said, like last year, people were constantly looking for an alternative to Nomadland and like trying to make Chicago 7 happen as like the crowd pleasing alternative, which ended up winning nothing. And yeah, like this year, everyone's looking for an alternative to Power of the Dog, because it's not a crowd pleaser. It's, a very well-made film, a very cerebral film, not for everyone, as we know, but this is not the People's Choice Awards, except for those two Twitter categories.
Hashtag fan favorite.
But even then, Power of the Dog, it got it in the top 10 there over some of these alleged crowd pleasers with crowd pleasing moments, you'd say. And but what's important is it's the voters. It only matters what the voters think, and because they're the ones picking winners. It's not a People's Choice Awards, and they already gave it 12 nominations. It got some surprise nominations in categories in which we were not expecting it to show up, really. So it has a across the board support, and we've talked about before, when nominations came out, how basically all of its other Best Picture rivals has something missing, right? And it's very well supported everywhere. And I think something like this controversy, ironically, it was also something that was missing from the quote unquote narrative of the Power of the Dog, because everyone understands it's well reviewed and what a picture, right? But it was, again, people were just thinking like the general public hates this film, it can't win, people will rank it low. But now this also gives it a message of importance. We all knew about the themes of it, but now it's kind of bearing out in real time that it's this Oscar nominated actor who got his nomination for A Star Is Born, starring Lady Gaga, by the way, has come out, just completely revolted by this film.
Correct.
Attacking it.
I definitely think, yeah. No, go ahead.
Sorry. So I think now it's kind of oh yeah, we knew it had a message before, but now we see that we need to drive it home, because it's here, and it's someone within our industry is speaking so loudly about this.
Right. I think that's 100% right. I would say like I said, I think the fact that if Sam Elliott would have said, if whatever it is, but if Sam Elliott would have said I didn't like that movie, it was really boring.
Right. He doesn't have to like the movie. You don't have to like every single movie. Completely fine for you not to like a movie.
He probably would have gotten more traction, I think, from the non-Power of the Dog stands, right? The anti-stands, non-fans, because I think I was listening to Bill Simmons recently, Joyce. I love the Ringer podcast, and he was talking about the Oscars, and he was like, and he and Sean Fennessy were talking, and I think he said something like, "Oh yeah, we got to pretend we like Power of the Dog," which I feel is a sentiment I could see people rallying.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
Because it's oh, that's a movie we got to can't talk smack about it, and it is what it is. But so Sam Elliott, if he would have just said it was boring, I think would have opened the door for more.
Which is what a lot of people who don't like the movie say.
Right. But no, he took it perhaps a little too far. And like we said, kind of missed the whole point of the movie. I mean, that's the crux of the film is what he is saying is wrong with it, which is weird.
It's weird. And also I LOL'd when he was so offended that she shot it in New Zealand, when I'm a lot of Westerns were shot in Europe. Probably
also mentioned how Benedict, I didn't get to it in the quote because it's a long rant. But he mentioned how Benedict is not on the horse very much. And I'm that's because we had seen, they actually don't use horses that much anymore because of animals on sets are they're kind of moving away to that and kind of doing more visual effects and subtly incredible visual effects works. And we've texted about it. I thought there's a great VFX reel for Power of the Dog where it's a lot of the stuff you're seeing in there is all filled in with visual effects. It's obviously shot on location in Montana, but a lot of the cattle, a lot of the houses, all these different things. And it's incredibly subtle work. And particularly with horses, I think there is only one or two shots of Benedict on the horse, probably because there was only one or two times he's actually on a horse. It's because
it's just when he's riding
and everything else
with
Right.
Cody, basically. Yeah.
So I guess the other problem is, which we talked about this last year. I feel we'll talk about this every year when there's a front runner, and we talked about this on Sunday night. How do you pick what the number two is? And is there a consensus around the number two? I think the last time we saw, I don't even know, what was the last time there was a true, surprise win? Would you say, what do you think it was even? Crash? I mean, they're a lot of these are not bigger, that much of a surprise in the last decade, let's say.
No, I mean, yeah, Parasite was always coming on strong, even if you were 1917 team,
right.
Green Book won
that
PGA.
year.
Yeah, Spot. Yeah, that was a three-way race with that and Big Short and Revenant.
Birdman and Boyhood. I mean,
yeah,
Birdman,
but that one just changed completely because it was like Boyhood for the first half through like Critics Awards, and then it completely changed to Birdman with
12 Years a Slave in Gravity, I guess, right?
Yeah. But so like, those are always like the top two though. So it's usually like, who at least like the top 2 or 3 are.
Yeah, if you look, I mean, like we could go through like Argo was a kind of Argo, but like King's Speech and Social Network, Hurt Locker and Avatar, Moonlight and La La Land, right? There was always like a 2, maybe even Green Book and Roma from 2019 show is like, there's always 2 this year. And like last year, there really was not 2, like Nomadland. And then you could say Promising Young Woman or Trial of Chicago 7 or Minari or whatever it was. There were just many options for that runner-up spot. And I feel like we have the same problem or issue this year because while Coda...
It's a problem if you don't want Power of the Dog to win.
Correct. If you're looking for like a little parody or some kind of race. Power of the Dog is obviously the top dog. Joyce, sorry about that one. But it is the top dog with 12 nominations. And obviously, like we said, overperformed everywhere. And we could talk about, like I've seen people in our comments, Joyce, I hazard to read the comments, but I've seen people be like, what happened?
I never read comments.
Is Power of the Dog going to win? And it's like, well, it would have been Best Picture, Best Director, probably Best Adapted Screenplay, maybe Best Cinematography. Like Cody Smith-McPhee obviously is still a major contender. That's 5 right there. If it won Cody, maybe 6. I mean, like it could win more, right? Like it's got 12 nominations. It's going to win like probably 4 at the least. Probably the most the night, I would argue, maybe tied with Dune, maybe
Dune like the thing 6. Is also like in this era we don't have like huge sweepers anymore. Right. We don't have like movies winning like 6 or 7 Oscars. It's like max like 4, so it could collect 4, but yeah, I think now like everyone's trying to look for who could beat it and like trying to adjust to it, because for the longest time it was Belfast.
Right. So,
and now a lot of people on like Team Belfast are jumping to Team Coda because of the SAGs.
So I feel like we were definitely out in front of that discourse, Joyce. I don't think you and I have been sold on Belfast as the crowd-pleasing alternative to Power of the Dog.
It's not a crowd. Nothing wrong with not being a crowd pleaser. Power of the Dog is not one. Like Belfast is just a drama.
And Belfast, I mean, like this is all putting the quality of the movies aside. If you're just thinking of like the noise these movies are making, Belfast is not making as much noise as a lot of these other movies. It's not like getting the enthusiasm that Coda seems to have. And we'll talk about West Side Story out on streaming today. It's not getting the viral reconsideration after 2 months that West Side Story is. It's not even like King Richard, I feel like has more online buzz than Belfast at the moment. So not that
like it has like King Richard has a locked like acting winner basically, who was one of the biggest movie stars on the planet.
So when Belfast is kind of like fallen off, then we're looking at Coda, West Side Story, and King Richard, I guess, as the next 3, and perhaps Dune would be the 4th. In there.
Yeah, Dune would just, I mean, if you subscribe to Dune, it would be just all tech support. It's also missing the director nomination, obviously.
No director nomination, no acting nomination, and it doesn't even really seem like being seriously considered as a Best Picture contender, but obviously it had 10 nominations, so it's like a strong factor. But then you're left with Coda and West Side Story and perhaps King Richard. But let's say Coda and West Side Story are the 2. Like we said on Sunday night, Coda only has 3 nominations. Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor for Troy Kotsur, and Best Adapted Screenplay for Sean Hayter. I could see it winning for Troy Kotsur for sure. I still have him predicted now after the SAG Awards, but does that mean that it's going to win 2 out of its 3 and it has no other Academy support? Like if it was going to be a Best Picture factor, and I guess the argument for this would be, well, it still wasn't widely seen. Apple's really done a great job recently getting it in front of people. They're obviously like a very like a cast that is warmly embraced, certainly like the most likable group of the year, let's say. No offense to the other casts, but I just feel like the embrace and the love for the Coda group is like very strong. So maybe if it was the Oscar nominations were like this week instead of a month ago, it would have gotten a Best Editing or any other extra nomination, Best Song, like we said, or Best score even. But no, it didn't. I don't even know if it was actually on the short list for score because it might not have been eligible. So I take that back. But it didn't get any extra nominations. So that means the Academy at large is not as fascinated with it as the viewing public and maybe the actors branch. So does that really make it a possible winner? It would be one of the most surprising Best Picture winners based on its nominations total, I'd say, in like a very long time. What do you think?
It has no, it's the only nominee without a directing nomination or any below the line nominations. And I think the last one to win without any of that was Grand Hotel, which was like 1933.
Yeah.
So yeah. You know,
Now,
even like Licorice Pizza also has 3 nominations, but it has directing.
Right. Licorice Pizza certainly didn't have the acting nomination, but it has the bigger nominations, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah. So it doesn't have that wide range support. And the thing is, it's like you could say, you know, it's on Apple and it's probably underseen. I think it is. I think more people are definitely going to watch it now, like post SAG. But it also wasn't a late movie. Like it premiered at Sundance. It was a huge Sundance hit last year. That's when I saw it. So, and then it like premiered, or it was released in August in theaters and on Apple. And like they were definitely campaigning it since then, even if like you could debate whether or not it was their number one, because they also had like Macbeth coming, but they were definitely campaigning it. And I think after a while they knew like it was the most like wide appealing film, because obviously Macbeth it's very esoteric. So I don't think it's like totally underseen. But yeah, I think the coda argument now is that, you know, like everyone loves it and people it'll get like a lot of like 2s and 3s. But I feel like we say that a lot about these kind of like feel-good movies every year, you know, like we were saying that about Chicago 7 last year, and that had 6 nominations. But it never really bears out. And yeah, it's hard to ignore its lack of across the board support. And I also feel like if it were that strong, like Marley should have at least gone in at SAG, right? Like she didn't even make the BAFTA long list.
It feels like the support is not there broadly. I think obviously the cast and none of its wins on Sunday were that unpredictable. At least
no.
It was not like it's a shocker that Troy won and that the movie won Best Ensemble. And like we have said, and you have said very many times, ensemble is not the same as Best Picture. And obviously,
no, and like, I kind of wish like we could just celebrate that win as what it is. Like it's honoring them, yes. The cast, it's best cast from a motion picture, and like let's not necessarily tag that as like now it's winning Best Picture, because as we've talked about, that award, that category doesn't even have a 50% hit rate with Oscar right. Best Picture. They're honoring 2 completely different things.
And we've seen over and over again, Minari accepted, but like a movie like Coda invariably wins at SAG and then doesn't win at the Oscars, right?
Like Coda is like a weaker Minari and a weaker Little Miss Sunshine.
Right.
Like those, like Minari had 6 nominations. It had, it got in for score. So it had a below the line. It had directing, and it had an extra acting nomination in Best Actor.
Right.
You know, and it's still only one for Yoo Jung-yoon.
Right.
And so like Coda can still win the acting award for Troy, obviously. And then like Little Miss Sunshine, it won PGA. So I think a lot of people think like Coda can win PGA, but Little Miss Sunshine also made BAFTA Best Film. Coda did not, you know.
Little Miss Sunshine was a front runner for a screenplay win, and it had another nomination for Abigail Breslin as well. So it had 4 nominations and won 2. And it won the PGA, obviously, and that was a different time.
Yeah, and also year. Like they had VGA as well. So yeah.
So I feel like, I guess we'll see if Coda wins best at the Producers Guild. I guess maybe I'll be a little more. You know me, it's like I love it. I would love for it to win, but it's hard to connect the dots for it to win based on recent and even you know Oscars history in general. And if it did win, it would be like a historic upset, the likes of which we have never seen, but. Which doesn't mean it can't happen, but that's what you're betting on. If you're picking Coda opposite Power of the Dog.
Yeah. And I guess like it definitely has like the rooting factor. It's the underdog versus like the Power of the Dog, basically.
Wow. So I made a dog joke and it was terrible. And yours is also bad, but slightly better.
And then, you know, Sam Elliott is in the doghouse now. So
wow. I bet you Sam Elliott loved Coda. No, I don't know if he did. He imagine not liking that either. No, I guess like I think that's what basically exactly right. And I think it's possible it could win. Like we said, I think if you watch the movies, its code is definitely more like if I was recommending a movie to a normal person, Joyce.
Normies love this movie.
I would say watch Coda. I would not say watch Power of the Dog. I would not
Well,
recommend.
that also goes back to what you were saying before and how they've been aggressively diversifying the membership. So it's skewing a little bit more highbrow, but they've always been slightly more highbrow or like somewhat snobby, right?
I think it's skewing way more snobby. I think it's getting more like,
yeah, it's getting definitely that way more. So in that sense, I enjoy Coda very much, but it's the safe pick, right? It's not like Power of the Dog is the challenging pick.
Right. And we've seen the Oscars, the Academy, as it's gotten more international and more diversified, is not afraid to go with the challenging movie. I mean, they're just not. Like we said, like the movies we've seen win Best Picture in the last 5-10 years are movies that probably would not have won Best Picture in the 90s. Moonlight, even Shape of Water is like a strange winner. You know what I mean? It's like these are movies
totally
that are
strange. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like these are not that, you look at the 90s and it's like Titanic, right? It's like, okay, like, that's great. It just is, there are different levels of artistry, I guess. Nothing against Titanic. I love Titanic. It's a great movie, but it's like different. It's just a different Academy. And I think that's what we're getting is this more kind of like international vibe, more cineast, like I said. So if Coda is not it, perhaps, though not totally written off, then what about West Side Story, Joyce? Because it's out on streaming today. Now, we talked about this before we recorded.
So many times.
There's definitely going to be a take that is, does West Side Story, it's going to be IndieWire, Deadline, one of our sister sites definitely writing, does West Side Story on streaming?
It's already pre-written. Okay.
Does West Side Story on streaming portend a renewed push for it to win Best Picture? Now, it is of these nominees and of these possible alternatives to Power of the Dog, I would argue it's probably with slightly ahead of Belfast on the checked off enough boxes. It got Best Director. It has an acting winner in Miranda DeVos, most likely. It missed in a lot of spots where it probably should have gotten in, specifically screenplay, which I think is one of the most criminal snubs still, like just
so rude.
Unbelievable. And Belfast obviously
editing.
Belfast obviously got in screenplay and seemingly
could win, but it also missed editing.
So I think it's like with Belfast, at least if you're like putting all the nominations, like you're saying, like it's missing the least along with Belfast for West Side Story. It's on streaming now. So a lot of people have seen, and we talked about this briefly on Sunday, it is now seemingly every day on my Twitter feed, I'm seeing people like, what movie rules? West Side Story. Wow, it's so great. For months and months, we've been saying, please go see West Side Story.
Everyone is finally getting on our level when we've been doing this for literally 3 months.
Does it have enough time with like less than a month basically now to go and to really have a renewed phase 2 push? And does that end up somehow shocking the world and winning? Again, it would be a major upset, I think, at this point if it did. But Joyce, what do you think?
No, like, I mean, it will be cool, but it's too little, too late. And it's just watching everyone discover it and rediscover it now is very frustrating for me because it's like we needed this energy in December and January, right? And I mean, we've talked like multiple times about like how their rollout and campaign were suboptimal. I'm not gonna repeat how I would have done it because I've done that at least 3 times, but there were some issues there, and it could have been better, and they could have definitely maxed out on nominations. They left at least 3 nominations on the table. Completely missed SAG Ensemble that it could have won probably, and like there was probably this like 2-week period in December, like after I saw it, and then let's say like by like December 17th, like when Spider-Man came out, where I really felt like it could make a push and be like number 2, because it's really good and it really has like everything. Like it's a crowd pleaser. Like, and it's a technical achievement as well. And then it became, we figured out that like they were not sending out screeners. A mistake. They needed to send it out. And then they could not, for some reason, get like rid of the narrative that it was a box office flop. Like I really take issue with this. Like obviously it did not, blow up the box office. We know that. But neither did a lot of these movies. And it's still, hold on, I have this up here. It's the number 2 highest grossing movie of the Best Picture nominees. Right. Obviously, Dune is first. Mm-hmm. But so it made 10 million its opening weekend, and everyone's like, oh, it's a flop. Like, it's not going to recoup its $100 million dollar budget. But it's made 38 million right now, which I don't think a lot of people expected after that opening weekend. Comparatively, like you look at like King Richard, which came out 3 weeks before that, it also flopped opening weekend, 5 million. You know, I remember those tweets, you know, calling out how like Will Smith is no longer a box office king, you know, and it, you know, it currently has close to 15 million. So not even 50 million yet. Licorice Pizza has already made more at 60 million over King Richard. And, you know, you could say it was on HBO Max, but it was on HBO Max for a month and then it went away. So it wasn't like building on that afterwards either. But for some reason, everyone loves to call West Side Story a box office flop when it's proven it's had legs to, you know, close in on 40 million. But also, ironically, I feel like the fact that it did have legs might have like prevented them from dumping it on, not dumping, that sounds bad, but like putting it on streaming earlier, like what happened with Nightmare Alley, which also flopped. And then they immediately put it on Hulu and HBO Max. So that came out a week after West Side Story, and it's been streaming for a month already.
Right.
Because they were just like, we'll cut our losses.
Right.
But I think they were like West Side Story, they were trying to max out at the box office because it was still like making money. But they should have put it on streaming earlier. And I think they should have pulled an Encanto with it, because Encanto had like a soft box office for a month. And then they only did 30 days with Encanto. And then they put it on Disney Plus on Christmas Eve. And then we know it blew up. Bruno, huge hit. Like they could have had their Bruno moment already with West Side Story if they maybe open it in November. I don't think they wanted to go up against House of Gucci, but you know, why not? But they could have put it on Disney Plus by Christmas and it could have had a moment.
I think I'm of 2 minds of this. I'm like, Twitter doesn't matter. This is all just like noise, right? And like,
no, but I do think like more people are watching it.
More people are watching it, and then while Twitter doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, it at least gets your movie into conversation. Like you're right, like Encanto is a massive. I mean, everyone watched it, especially if you had kids or anything, and it's been like a blockbuster hit on Disney Plus, and then lost some money at the box office, certainly. But it's like the cultural footprint of Encanto is bigger now than it would have been if it made 200 million at the box office. You know what I mean? It just is like much bigger, and so that trade-off, I think, is what the new paradigm is. So with West Side Story, yeah, they kept it in theaters for like 2 months basically, and slowly grinded out that 30 million, whatever. But if it was on like this week, like we saw the power of this weekend, at least, or over the weekend. And again, it's a small amount, but it's like people were talking about it, very enthusiastically talking about it. I just think like having it in the conversation helps it seem like a winner. And like we've said in the past, like people want to vote for a thing they want to vote for a winner. You know what I mean? Like it's just whatever psychological reason that is. Sometimes they won't even vote for their favorite thing. They'll just pick like, well, sure, I think it's going to win, so I'm going to vote for it. And West Side Story doesn't have the feel of a winner at the moment, or it didn't, because it was like, you're right. Like a lot of the conversation was it's a flop, even though it's really good and not a lot of people saw it. And the fact is like, that is a negative. That's a neg. And Power of the Dog, it's like, you know, people loved it. It's a great critical success. It obviously was watched on Netflix. That makes it seem like a bigger bet. So now I think if West Side Story was available earlier, it would have really helped that. I don't know, but
yeah. And also like when that clip at the dance at a gym went viral this weekend, it was like, if you were someone who was not planning on watching it, but then you saw that shot, you know, maybe, and then like all the talk around it, and you read Guillermo del Toro's like 13 tweet thread, maybe you're like, oh man, I want to watch this now. You know,
I think so. And I think it's funny to me is that like Best Director feels the most locked, obviously, because I think Jane is going to win. And I think it was a different year. I think this would have helped like push Steven Spielberg further up in the conversation. I still think it could, but I don't think he's going to win, obviously.
I don't think he's going to win, but yeah, I felt really like good about the fact that he did get in, because when everyone was doubting him getting in, like getting the nomination, I was like, I don't think they're gonna ignore him, because it's such a technical achievement and everything he does with that film and the camera work and movement. And you see that in that clip, that everyone saw. So yeah, it's good that he got in, but I think, yeah, Jane, unless like Jane loses DGA, like there's,
I don't think Jane's gonna lose DGA, but I want, so like, what do you think this means for us? Like we're talking right now. You can watch West Side Story. Rachel Zegler Joyce was tweeting all about it. She's watching it right now on Disney Plus, probably.
She's seen it like at least 252 times.
So what do we think that's going to mean for West Side Story being available now to stream? Do you think it's going to, like, we already expect Ariana DeBose to win, so it's got a win there. Does it add another win or two now? Because
I think that's the most it can hope for. Renewed. Like it could grab another tech, win. Like maybe it could pull a Lincoln and win an acting award and production design, or like another category.
Cinematography, maybe.
The puddle shot.
It could. I mean, like, I could see it. Like, I think one of the things you're looking at is, I don't know, like the way that people have rallied around the filmmaking and the power of the filmmaking that Spielberg does in the movie, and like the technical prowess. I wonder if he's not going to win Best Director, did they shift that to Best Cinematography? Because obviously, Giannis
maybe,
Kaminski,
and it's like,
yeah,
him and Ganesh Kaminsky, have been working together for almost 30 years now. And it's funny because like last night I watched the 61 West Side Story for the first time in like 20 years at least. And yeah, I like a lot of thoughts, but one of the main things I was struck by, which I sort of remembered from the first time watching it way back when, was that like how static the camera is in that film, because they really wanted the wide shots of all the balletic choreography. And then in this one, like Spielberg's, it's so different, because it's like the camera, you're like in the action with them, especially in the beginning when they're like defacing the Puerto Rican flag, the mural and everything. It's like Saving Private Ryan is my favorite movie. And I felt like I was in the opening 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan when I was watching like this West Side Story, like in November and stuff. So it's so different. And then you see it with like, he's the master of the crane shot, and you see it with that sweeping shot into the gym. You see it like all over this movie if you haven't watched it yet. So it's just so different. And yeah, like different times and like different cinematic styles. But yeah, it's a real technical achievement. So I think the best it could hope for now is that it has this renewed buzz because of its new streaming life, and maybe it could bag another win or two. But maybe it'll also make people feel bad for not seeing it sooner.
I will say,
I don't begrudge anyone who like did not want to go to the theater to see it, because if you're not comfortable going, and this opened in the middle of Omicron spiking, so I don't begrudge that. And I know a lot of people who've seen it in the theater in the last 2 weeks and loved it. So, but maybe if you were like a voter and you hadn't touched your screener yet, maybe now you feel bad for not voting for it.
It's available on Disney Plus and HBO Max, because it's a Fox movie and they kind of had to do that, like they did with Nightmare Alley, which was on Hulu and HBO Max. Joyce, I guess I would say the other thing is that regardless, I feel like this is a movie that when you're thinking of adapting a popular product or a piece of IP, the way Spielberg does it, it totally, like you said, like watching the original, it totally has a reason for existing. It's so much different, even though it's the same story. They had so much context to like the characters and flesh everything out.
Oh my God, the characters are so much better in this one.
It's a lot more cinematic, like you said. I think just everything about it is so well thought out, and they put so much care into like not just retreading what was already done and won 10 Oscars versus what they wanted to do. It's a really remarkable achievement. And I guess, I saw people like, I think Spielberg wants to do something with like the Bullet character, Steve McQueen, famous film. And I saw some people being like, why is he doing that? And I'm like, after West Side Story, he could remake stuff. I'm in on it. Like, let him do it. He has such a great, I think he has a lot of ideas on how to make it different enough. And
yeah.
Why not?
And also like yeah, he's already, this was obviously his lifelong dream to direct a musical. And then he has finally also made his like semi-autobiographical film, The Fablemans, which is coming out this year. Like he's talked about that forever. So he's like checked those two things off his bucket list. So now just let him direct some bomb-ass car chases. Like, come
on. So Joyce, also another movie before we move on to, we'll talk about the Oscars broadcast. Drive My Car is now available too on HBO Max. Streaming, so it's a big streaming week, and there's all these movies are going to be HBO Max is a lot of the Best Picture nominees in March. I think King Richard and Dune are both cycling back on the service. They obviously have Nightmare Alley already, and now West Side Story and Drive My Car. So that's pretty good. It's a pretty good moment to watch these movies. You haven't watched them, I guess, and I'll be curious to see. I think Drive My Car, we expect that to win certainly an international feature. I don't think it'll win anywhere else, but I guess this could be another boon for it as well. Perhaps more people will obviously see it. It was a very big art house success, but I think now that it's more widely available, I think people will check it out.
Yeah. So if you want to catch up on all your Best Picture nominees, you can. I think, it could probably, it could be like an upset pick in adapted screenplay. I know a lot of people think it could win that. If they think, I don't really know if people vote that way, like they want to spread the wealth. Like I'm not going to vote for Jane Campion in 2 categories.
Right. I do think that, I think that's a category that she will not win personally. I think that there's
I think also people feel she will lose that because it lost the scripter over the weekend as well, right, to The Lost Daughter. So
I could see Lost Daughter winning there. I could see Coda winning there. There's another spot. If it was, if it's going to win Best Picture, maybe it wins there, or Drive My Car. It's actually a pretty competitive category for sure. So I don't know. I'm like, is Jane Campion going to win 2 Oscars? I guess she could very easily, but
she could win 3. So she could be the first one to win those 3.
But I think maybe she'll just get to 2, perhaps, instead of the 3. Because like you said, I think there is a drive to spread the wealth often. I think especially when there's other liked movies that are available, like Lost Daughter, like we said, kind of overperformed, probably came close to a Best Picture nomination, got Jessie Buckley in. If it's not going to win Best Actress or Best Supporting Actress, and people do really like it, maybe Maggie Gyllenhaal wins for Best Adapted Screenplay, or Coda obviously could win there. If maybe Troy doesn't win, it's not going to walk away with nothing. I always try to think that, but it doesn't always work that way, because I remember I was like, Lady Bird has to win something. People love it.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have to win anything.
Totally nothing. It should have won Best Picture, but it won nothing that year. Joyce, do you want to do the Oscar broadcast? So this is still happening. They're not going off of it, which we predicted last week, because it's like they purposely announced it this late. Yes.
Feel like double down on it.
Let me see. They did an interview this week with Deadline, our pals there. Don Hudson did, and Dave Rubin. So CEO Don Hudson, Academy CEO, and President Dave Rubin. They talked about, it's basically what we said. They are concerned about the ratings. The ratings have been in the tank. Last year was lowest rated ever. 3 of the last 4 have been the worst rated Oscars of all time. So it's a TV show, and on a major network, they want to be people to watch, and this is what they think is going to do it. I will say, I just want to read this one part because it's proof that you and I should be maybe called in. We looked at a lot of different ideas of taking categories and doing like the Emmys and presenting them on another night or another way. But we thought, if we can be the most respectful to all the nominees and winners, how do we do that? And so this year, a critical year where we knew we had to make changes, we worked out this plan. That's Don Hudson. So that was my Emmys idea, doing a virtual, creative arts Emmys, but for the Oscars. They didn't do it.
No, they didn't do it. See, the fundamental problem with that idea, which I love the creative arts Emmys. We've talked about this, and I loved what they did 2 years ago when it was 5 nights streaming. Everyone could see it. Like, the Emmys have a million categories. It's completely impossible for them to present it all on one night in 3 hours. The Oscars only has 23 categories. They can totally do this in one night. The Emmys on the main show presents 27 categories, and they get it all in.
Right.
Like, there's basically just no excuse to be cutting these 8 categories when you're not even trying to shorten the show to like 2 hours or something. So like over the weekend, I was with my friend, and he asked me to like explain this like controversy or whatever to him. And I told him, and then I was like, they're cutting like these 8 categories. And that's why everyone's mad. And he's like, so is the show gonna be like 2 hours? And I was like, oh, no, it's still 3 hours. And he's like, so like, what are they using the time for? I was like, for like comedy sketches and more montages, basically. He's like, why? And he's like, because I said, like, they think that's what's gonna increase the ratings. And he's like, but like, why? Like, no one is gonna watch the show because like you're cutting these categories. Like, why don't you just make the show for people who are watching it? I was like, exactly. And he has never watched the Oscars before in his life. And he's not going to start now because they're cutting 8 categories and adding, you know, another sketch or 15.
It seems like that's the obvious thing. Even myself, who is like, I'm actually in on these changes just because I think I just feel that the Oscars is not for mainstream audiences anymore.
It's not, but that's also why they shouldn't try to pander to them and do this like BS to pander to them. I
talked to Pamela Martin this week, Joyce, an Oscar nominee and Best Editing.
You told me about this, yes.
I asked her about this, and she said this. She said, I was like, does it take away from the nomination? That's how I framed it for her. She was like, no, it doesn't. But unfortunately, the way it was done, it doesn't make you feel good. It's a little disheartening. They presented it in a way that was like, oh, the way it was going to play on the show is the same experience for everyone. And that's what they've said in interviews this week. They're like, your Oscar is still getting shown on the show. It's going to be great, blah, blah, blah. And she says if it was the same experience for everybody, they wouldn't have chosen those categories. They would have pulled them randomly out of a hat, which is true, because then maybe Ariana DeBose wins her Oscar, or Cody Smith McPhee wins his Oscar in a pre-show environment. And then she, like you were just saying, she said, I don't think they're going to gain more viewers by doing this. People who don't watch the Oscars are not interested in this sort of thing. So it's a little disappointing. And the fact that they're spending more screen time on Twitter voted best awards at the expense of the production designers or editors or short films being a live show in the way we're accustomed to is disappointing as well. So, I mean, that's what they're fighting up against.
I mean, it's just, they're supposed to be celebrating their art form, and it's like they're embarrassed by themselves.
It's gonna be tough. And the other thing is, like, even again, me being like not totally anti it, I think the bigger issue is that everything they do now is under a microscope, right? Like you were saying. So whatever they're replacing with is going to be, well, even if I didn't get a boring speech from craftsperson X, instead I got this really bad comedy bit with celebrity Y, basically, or this unnecessary montage that we don't care about. And I think that is going to amplify the criticism a lot, because
oh yeah, for sure, because you're just robbing this person of their moment, like the career peak for them, basically, you know. And the other, I don't know if it's in that interview or like one of the other ones that they did, but they were explaining how they were gonna cut in like those 8 speeches, like, and weave them into the show. And you know, one of them said like, oh, you won't miss like the emotional impact or something. It's like, yes, you would, because you're just gonna like cut to the part where maybe like they start crying or something, or like you're thinking like their parents or, you know, whatever. And like, we're not gonna have the context for it because it's gonna be all choppy. Like, it's like these emotional moments like hit us because of the build up to it, because we've seen like their reaction, like maybe it's an upset, like how shocked they are, and then they're just like hugging like all their collaborators and everything. And like the emotional moments won't have impact if you don't have like context around it. You know, like think about Michael Keaton's speech at SAGs on Sunday, late because he was in the bathroom. But that entire thing, I don't know, it was a couple minutes long, but you know, he rolled up on stage like John Hamm at the Emmys, and then gave this long speech, covered a lot of things, and they never once played him off. But yeah, and then, you know, he ended with this really touching, moving tribute to his nephew who died of a drug overdose. And we won't have that same impact if you just show that ending, even though it's really sad, what he's talking about. Like, it doesn't hit you the same.
The other thing I guess for me with this is everything you said there is true. I do think there is a world where they should have figured out a different way to do this, I guess. And this, we could fold this into fan favorite. It feels like the Academy leadership doesn't have the greatest grasp of how the online culture helps the show, let's say, or can be used positively and negatively, let's say, because to me, is there a second screen environment where they're showing the full speech and like, you know, people are watching this Oscars with multiple things going on. You're looking at your phone, you're watching on your laptop, you're going to be doing all different things. That's how most people are actually watching it now. And is there a world where you get the full emotional impact on like Twitter? Like the SAG Awards, every speech on the SAG Awards was up immediately, basically, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, that's great, because if I was not paying attention or something, I could go back and look and see
you
what
missed
happened.
the I am an actor thing.
Right. I missed the I am the actor thing, and I was able to find it in 2 seconds, right? So I think the SAG Awards, and we mocked the Golden Globes for their the way they announced their winners, but that was at least an enthusiasm that created a viral
that was a moment, and I will never forget those tweets.
And I don't know that the Oscars definitely have a grasp on the power of how they could weaponize social media in that fashion and like really enhance the show. And I don't know. I don't mind necessarily the idea of changing how they do things, but I don't know. This doesn't feel the most thought out. Like it does feel like if you read between the lines of that quote that I read earlier from Dawn Hudson, where it's like, you know, we talked about a lot of things, but this is a critical year where we had to make changes and we worked out this plan. It sounds like they would have preferred to have a little more time to sit and think on how to reconstruct the Oscars for a current audience that would help enthused film fans and people who like the Oscars like ourselves, and then just the regular moviegoer who's like, I like Spider-Man, but perhaps did not have time to do that this year. I guess you could argue, why haven't they been working on this since the end of last year's show? So now, why did we have to rush to this decision when you had a year to figure out all the issues that were present last year and were present the year before and the year before that? But regardless, that's what they came up with. So I don't know. I just think that that's it. And then you look at so to dovetail that into the Oscars fan favorite choice. Voting closes on this Thursday. We're recording this on Wednesday. They released the leaderboard this week. Wow. Is one
yeah, a lot of, if anyone predicted this top 10.
Here's the top 10 in alphabetical order. They didn't release the vote totals. Army of the Dead, Zack Snyder's movie, in there perhaps because Justice League was not eligible, because only movies that were eligible
for sure. They, they know what they're doing.
Cinderella for Camila Cabello stands. Dune, Malignant, which is a completely unhinged horror movie that is hilarious and went viral because of how silly it is in like a good way. People actually really liked it. Minamata, which is a Johnny Depp movie. Power of the Dog somehow in there, great fan favorite. Sing 2, Spider-Man No Way Home, The Suicide Squad, and Tick Tick Boom. So what I see here is a couple of Netflix movies that have the power of Netflix behind them. Johnny Depp stans who are very aggressive, very online,
passionate about him, and
Zack Snyder stans who are very passionate online. Camila Cabello stans who are very passionate online. Sing 2, because I guess parents and kids like Sing 2, perhaps. Dune and Malignant, great for them, and Suicide Squad, all HBO Max movies that were also in theaters, and then Spider-Man, which is the biggest movie of recent memory. I mean, this is not what you want, Joyce, I would say.
So I think I would, of these, I think I would first want Cinderella to win, because that would just be hilarious. And then, they could do that flash mob again for everyone. That could be one of their bits. And then, but I also want the Power of the Dog to win, because the whole reason these two Twitter awards exist is because they're, basically afraid that like Power of the Dog is going to win, or like, it's the front runner that is, too cerebral for general audiences. And they basically created these awards to pander to Spider-Man fans.
Yes.
So I would love it if the Power of the Dog beat Spider-Man.
I would too.
Like,
I want this to be complete chaos for them. I think it's so
like it's what they deserve.
Also, I don't know if, again, talking about like the seeming lack of online savvy. Who knows? Like this has generated a lot of noise for them. Certainly, Oscars fan favorite, both derisively and positively. People are voting. So in the end, they're sitting there in their Zoom meetings, and like this has been an unqualified success, certainly, to get at least interest in the show. And no bad publicity, no publicity is bad publicity, I guess, is probably the idea. But if you wanted to avoid potentially Mini Mata winning, or Army of the Dead, or Cinderella, when you clearly wanted Spider-Man to win, or even like a Tick Tick Boom, they obviously had like ideas of what should win this.
They're trying not to rig it, which I respect.
I actually don't. I think they should have like put
they
like
should rig it.
Yeah, well, they could have said like, here are the 5 movies, pick your favorite. You know, if it's a Critics' Choice Awards, the Critics' Choice Awards kind of like steer you in the right direction a little bit, right? I mean, I'm sorry, People's Choice Awards, Critics' Choice Awards too, probably steer in the right direction. But
Critics' Choice, they'll just have ties.
But yeah. I'm like, they kind of like, I don't know, they should have perhaps put a little few guardrails.
You think they'll rig it for Spider-Man?
I have no idea. I don't know if they could do that. I don't know. I think it would be so
obvious. I do believe these are the actual top 10.
I do also, because if they weren't, there's no way Mini Mata is
like they would not include like Johnny Depp in there.
Right, it barely exists. Like it's on there because Johnny Depp.
And we saw how rabid the Camilla fans were like the day this started.
Yeah, so. And we saw the Zack Snyder fans as well. So yeah. Like those are like that is what happened here. So one of those most likely could win, unless they rig it perhaps and say that surprise Spider-Man did win. I don't know.
I don't even understand like how all of this works. Like, so what happens after tomorrow? Like,
so voting closes and they have a month to figure out how they're going to back out of this, I guess. I don't
know. Like, are we going to have like, are they going to like winnow it down to top 5? I don't understand, because like with the other one, Oscars cheer moment, when they announced this whole thing, they never said that there were 2 phases. They never said like closing was going to, and like phase 1 voting would end on February 24th, and then all of a sudden they just tweeted that like the day before last week, and it's like, oh, okay. And then these are your 5 finalists with J Hud in there,
right?
So I don't even know what they're doing.
I don't know. I guess we'll find out. I have no idea. I mean, like literally no idea. But it's definitely not gonna be what you want. And again, if you wanted to do this, they could have just said, hey, we're gonna honor Spider. I mean, I guess, like I said, it obviously created a large amount of noise around the Oscars that wasn't there previously. Not positively, but definitely noise. At the same time, if you wanted to honor Spider-Man, you could have just said, hey, guess what? We're going to throw Spider-Man we all love Spider-Man, and it's going to have a major part of our show, you know?
Yeah, like you could still talk about Spider-Man. Put it in one of your montages. Like you don't need to try to give it a fake award.
You know, I went to the Oscars, Joyce, 2018, I guess I went, or 2019, I guess. Was it 20?
You were there for Green Book?
No, 2018. I was there for Shape of Water. And that was the year Black Panther had come out and was a massive, massive cultural phenomenon already. And they did like a thing on Black Panther, I think, in that Oscars, if I remember correctly. Is that the same year, or did I miss that up?
I think like Chadwick presented, right?
2018.
I haven't ever watched that show, so I don't know.
Right, Black Panther.
Because like the ceremony was like a week after. Oh no, not a week after, because it was the Olympics. So, because Black Panther opened mid-February. So it was like
Black Panther mid-February. So they did something at that Oscars, basically in the 2018 Oscars. They did a thing on Black Panther, and then the year later it was actually nominated. But like, I'm like, you could do a tribute to the big like movie.
Tom,
get the cast
Holland
right.
Just reunite all 3 Spideys. Do the meme.
Easily could have done that. Great, pointing at each other. Very fun. This is.
But just you know who thinks Spider-Man should have been nominated? Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah, he did, and Jimmy Kimmel. A lot of basics people think, and I would say too. I'd be happy with it to get nominated. I think it could have found a spot, especially like, again, it's a movie.
Oh yeah, if I got in 10, I would be fine with it. Yeah.
The thing that's funny is that also, even if it had gotten in, do you think it
wouldn't have won?
Obviously wouldn't have won, but I don't believe that people would. I don't believe that people would have just watched because it was nominated for Best Picture. I guess that's the other thing. Like, I don't know that you would have regular non-Oscar watchers who they're courting.
No. They don't care about that. Like the Spidey fans, you mean, like Marvel fans? No.
Yeah, I don't think people would watch. So I don't know,
because they don't. Yeah, like you said before, like they don't understand like internet culture. Like people have very short attention spans, and no one reads anything. They just read the tweet, like the headline. They don't actually read the story. They, even though TikTok is going to 10 minutes now, like they want their like nice brief clip, So like if they know like Spider-Man is nominated, they'll celebrate it, but they're not gonna watch it, and they'll just wait for, like whatever moment involving them on, like if like Zendaya and like Tom are presenting or something, or if they're there, they'll be here for like the fashion. Right. Like the red carpet stuff. And if they do like a bit or something, like they'll pay attention on like social media, but they're not going to watch it.
Let me ask you this. Is this what we're headed towards? We'll wrap up here because I'm sure people are like, why are you still talking about this show? It's not, who cares? But I guess looking at what they've talked about, the changes they made here, and just the idea, it's clear that the traditional idea of what an Oscars telecast is not the same anymore, and certainly not going to be as watched. And I wonder, I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, the Tonys do a better show than the Oscars. Now the Tonys give out awards and commercials. No one watches the Tonys. So it's like, you're going to say, oh, why are you trying to catch the Tonys? But this year's Tonys, I believe, or last year's, was split into two. It was a tough year because of all the COVID stuff. There wasn't a lot of nominees, obviously.
Well, it was also delayed for over a year.
They ended up doing two shows, right? They did a streaming show on like Paramount Plus, and then on CBS, they did like a celebration of Broadway is how they framed it. And it was like 2 hours. I think they gave out like maybe a couple of big awards, but it was mostly just like performances and tributes and reunions and all these different things. And I wonder after this year, based again, reading between the lines of that quote where it sounded like they were rushed into this, even though they had a year or 2 years to figure it out. Let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. They were rushed into it. What if next year's show ends up being a little bit of a hybrid where you're giving out awards? They are obviously this year setting up the idea that they could start the show at 7:00, but the televised version starts at 8. What if they kick this back to like 5 or 6 o'clock? They're going to have something that streams on Hulu or Disney Plus or whatever ABC property they want to. And then starting at 8 o'clock on ABC or even 9 o'clock on ABC, they go 9 to 11 with like a tighter 2 hour, like, here's a tribute to movies, and we're going to give out Best Picture and Best Actor and Best Actress, and everything else is earlier. And it's basically a full day of viewing if you're an Oscars fan, but what is on ABC is a lot different. Do you think people would be outraged by that?
I think, didn't they address this at how like they didn't want to stream that earlier hour with those 8 categories? Because it's like basically ABC being like, no, like we want everything on linear TV. Because I think people would still be upset about this whole idea, but if like that first hour were streamable, like they would be a tad more accepting of it, because it's like you can still see everything in full. Like it's the speeches are not going to be edited down, shoved into the broadcast.
I do think that's what they should do. Also, I've seen people be like, oh, it's not fair to the winners in that first hour because there's going to be a red carpet going on, and like you're going to have if Tammy Faye wins Best Hair and Makeup, which people are expecting, Jessica Chastain is not going to be in there, perhaps, because she's going to be on the red carpet doing an interview. And again, the one Oscars I went to, so I'm an expert on this, obviously, Joyce. I have bad news for people. There are rarely times people are moving around all the time. They're
in the green room just boozing it up, like at the bar.
The bar is packed. Obviously, now who knows with COVID and stuff. But when I went, the bar was constantly packed. People are locked out in the segments. They only could come in during the commercial breaks. And often they're just not in there. And that's everybody from like the rubes, like myself, who were there, to like famous people who were not there. So I do think there is like maybe a false impression of what it actually is like at the ceremony. And I think that's probably why, Dawn Hudson and Dave Rubin are like, it's going to be no real different than it is normally, because fact of the matter is the chances of Jessica Chastain being in there perhaps for the best animated short winner are low, because maybe she'll be out, running to the bathroom or doing something else or whatever it is. I'm just used her because I thought of her. But so I do wonder if eventually would they stream it. I guess they're probably going to see how it goes this year and decide. But I would say maybe that's a way to split the difference between the massive overhaul of like creative arts Emmys style, like we're going to do a show every night, like we talked about, or one show earlier. And then like what they're doing, maybe just make a longer day. Some of it's streamed.
They should just stream the whole thing.
It should definitely stream the whole thing.
Because there are Oscar fans around the world who want to watch it.
Right.
And not everyone wants to watch the Oscars, but there are people who want to watch Oscars and want to see these 8 categories in full. So just do that.
And there's an audience for that they could, again, it's like advantageous to them because they could sell to us, right? They're going to sell, they could sell, if they were airing that first 2 hours or whatever it was, if they said, hey, we're going to start the Oscars at 5:00, from 5 to 11, we would be watching that Oscars.
Yeah, like we would watch all 6 hours. And
they could take they could run ads in the YouTube stream or on Hulu or whatever it is, or take breaks. It's just, there is a world where it's more advantageous for them to do that. And I wonder if we'll eventually get there. And these are just the growing pains to get there. But
I mean, ABC has them until 2028. So
right. But ABC could do this because they have all these.
They could, but like it's, you know, apparently they rejected that idea of streaming that first hour. So
yeah, that's true. Joyce, I got nothing else then. Any last words before we wrap up? Belfast still winning, I guess.
You're gonna move to Belfast now?
No, I'm sorry. Power of the Dog still winning. I'm reading Belfast. Power of the Dog is still winning. I'm not moving to Belfast.
I was like, wow, after all this.
No, according to our odds, Power of the Dog is still the overwhelming favorite. Belfast in second, West Side Story in third, Dune in fourth.
Nothing's really changed that much, I don't think. We have a couple guilds this weekend, Ace.
Yeah.
Art directors, so we'll see.
All right. Well, we'll talk again soon, Joyce, and
I'm sure we'll have another fan favorite update next week.
Can't wait, and hopefully cheer moment. Okay, bye.